The luxury car showroom was silent, except for the soft echo of polished shoes against marble floors. Expensive cars gleamed under bright lights, each one worth more than most people's homes. Salesmen in perfect suits stood nearby, carefully watching the entrance as wealthy clients occasionally walked in. Then a woman entered who didn't belong in their world. She wore a simple navy dress and modest shoes. No designer bag, no jewelry, no visible sign of wealth. Within seconds, the atmosphere in the showroom changed. Eyes turned, brows tightened. The staff immediately decided who she was, and more importantly, who she was not. She quietly walked toward the most expensive car in the showroom, admiring its craftsmanship with calm curiosity. But before she could even reach the vehicle, someone stepped forward to stop her, and within minutes, the woman would be escorted out of the building, humiliated in front of everyone. What none of them realized was that by this time, the woman's name was Elena Carter, and at first glance she looked like someone the world had learned to ignore. Elena lived a quiet life in a modest neighborhood outside the city. The small house she lived in blended in perfectly with the surrounding homes, nothing flashy or attention-grabbing about it. Neighbors knew her as a polite and hard-working woman who often left early in the morning and returned in the evening with groceries or small shopping bags. Most people assumed she worked a regular job. What they didn't know was that Elena valued something far more important than appearances: simplicity. For most of her life, Elena had grown up believing that wealth should never change the way someone treated others. Her parents had taught her humility from an early age, raising her in a household where kindness mattered far more than status. But life had taken her on a path that few people knew about. Years earlier, Elena had met a man who saw something special in her long before success entered his life. He was ambitious, driven, and filled with dreams bigger than the small apartment they shared at the time. His name was Daniel Carter. Back then, Daniel had very little. He was working long hours building a company that many people believed would never succeed. Investors rejected him. Banks doubted him. Even some friends quietly distanced themselves, convinced he was chasing impossible goals. But Elena never left. She supported him through every setback, every sleepless night, every moment when the world seemed determined to prove him wrong. And eventually everything changed. Daniel's company exploded into success almost overnight. What had started as a small technology startup grew into a global corporation worth billions. Suddenly, the man who had once struggled to pay rent was being invited to exclusive business conferences, elite gatherings, and meetings with some of the most powerful people in the world. But despite all that success, Elena refused to let money define who she was. While Daniel often traveled for work, Elena continued living the same quiet lifestyle she had always known. She dressed simply, shopped at normal stores, and rarely attended the glamorous events Daniel was invited to. To Elena, humility was not an act. It was simply who she was. Unfortunately, the world often judged people by what they could see, not by the truth hidden beneath the surface. And that was exactly what happened on the afternoon. She decided to visit the luxury dealership. That morning had been unusually peaceful. Elena had planned to surprise Daniel with something meaningful. His birthday was approaching, and after years of supporting his dreams, she wanted to get him a gift that symbolized how far they had come together. Daniel had once mentioned years ago that if his company ever succeeded, he would buy a Rolls Royce, not as a display of wealth, but as a reminder of perseverance. He had never bought one. He had been too busy building his empire. So Elena decided she would do it for him. The luxury dealership in the center of the city was known for selling the most prestigious vehicles in the world. Inside its massive showroom were Ferraris, Bentleys, Lamborghinis, and several rare vehicles that only the wealthiest collectors could afford. But Elena didn't walk in wearing expensive brands or designer labels. She simply walked in as herself. And the moment she stepped through the door, the employees had already made their decision about her. The showroom manager, a man named Victor Langford, prided himself on running a dealership that catered exclusively to elite clientele. In his mind, every person who entered the showroom was evaluated within seconds. Their clothing, their watch, their car parked outside. Everything mattered. And when Victor saw Elena, he immediately categorized her in the wrong place. To him, she looked like someone who had wandered into the wrong building. At first, he ignored her, but then he noticed something that immediately irritated him. Elena had stopped beside one of the most expensive vehicles in the showroom, a sleek luxury car placed under special lighting near the center of the floor. She studied the car carefully, appreciating the design, running her fingers gently along the polished surface. That was when Victor decided to intervene. He walked toward her with controlled politeness, though his expression carried a subtle impatience. Within seconds, the situation would begin escalating in a way that would soon become the biggest mistake the dealership had ever made. And the humiliation Elena would face that afternoon would soon lead to a moment that every employee in that showroom would remember for the rest of their lives. The showroom carried the quiet arrogance of a place designed only for the wealthy. Every surface reflected perfection: polished marble floors, spotless glass walls, and rows of luxury vehicles sitting like priceless sculptures under soft white lights. To the employees, the showroom was not simply a workplace. It was a stage, and every customer who walked in was silently judged before a single word was spoken. Elena Carter had already been judged within seconds of entering. Her modest navy dress, simple shoes, and calm demeanor immediately placed her in a category that Victor Langford and his sales staff had learned to dismiss. In their eyes, she did not look like someone capable of buying anything inside that building. But Elena wasn't aware of the quiet assumptions surrounding her. She walked slowly through the showroom, admiring the craftsmanship of each vehicle with genuine appreciation. The precision of the bodywork, the detailed interiors, the quiet power these machines represented, it fascinated her. She paused near one of the most elegant vehicles on display, a silver luxury car positioned under bright lights near the center of the showroom. To Elena, it was simply beautiful, but to the staff, it was a vehicle reserved for very specific types of customers. Customers who, in their minds, did not look like her. Victor Langford approached with carefully controlled politeness, the kind that masked irritation rather than kindness. He observed Elena closely as she examined the car. To him, her curiosity felt like a disturbance. Something about her calm confidence unsettled him, because people who didn't belong here were usually hesitant or nervous. Elena showed none of that. She simply studied the car with quiet interest, appreciating every detail. Victor stood beside her for a moment before finally deciding to intervene. His posture was professional, but his tone carried a subtle message that everyone nearby could easily recognize. It was a tone used when someone was being politely told they were out of place. The nearby salesmen watched the interaction carefully. Some exchanged brief glances with each other. They had seen this situation many times before. Someone wandered into the dealership, curious about cars they could never afford. Usually, the conversation ended quickly, but this time something was different. Elena remained calm and composed, completely unaware of the silent judgment surrounding her. She moved toward another car across the showroom floor. The employees began watching more closely now. Victor followed slowly, his patience growing thinner with every step. In his mind, she had already taken up more time than necessary. Soon another salesman approached Victor quietly, whispering something while glancing toward Elena. Their expressions carried a mixture of amusement and annoyance. To them, Elena's presence was beginning to feel like an inconvenience. Several well-dressed customers were also inside the showroom, browsing the vehicles with the assistance of sales representatives. A few of them began noticing the situation. The contrast between Elena and the environment around her was impossible to ignore. Expensive suits, luxury watches, designer handbags, and in the middle of it all, a quiet woman in a simple dress calmly observing the cars. Victor finally decided the situation needed to end. He walked toward Elena again, this time with a firmer expression. The energy in the room shifted slightly. The salesmen nearby slowed their movements, curious to see how the moment would unfold. Elena had now stopped beside one of the most exclusive cars in the showroom, a vehicle placed behind a velvet rope barrier. The lighting above it created a glowing reflection along its polished surface. It was one of the most expensive vehicles the dealership offered. Only serious buyers were ever invited to examine it closely. And now Elena stood beside it. Victor stepped forward. His voice remained controlled, but the underlying message was unmistakable. He gestured politely toward the entrance of the showroom. Several employees nearby lowered their voices as they watched. The situation had reached the moment they had expected from the beginning. Elena remained still for a moment. There was no anger in her expression, no embarrassment either, just a quiet understanding. She glanced around the showroom one last time. The luxury cars, the employees watching from a distance, the silent judgment written across several faces. Elena slowly. The next morning began like any other day at the luxury dealership. Employees arrived early, dressed in their tailored suits and polished shoes, ready to greet wealthy customers and close expensive deals. The showroom lights reflected off the polished cars exactly as they had the day before, creating an atmosphere of exclusivity and prestige. Victor Langford walked across the showroom floor with his usual confidence. In his mind, the dealership operated perfectly under his management. The previous afternoon's incident with the simple woman had already faded from his thoughts. To him, it had been nothing more than a minor interruption, just another person who clearly didn't belong there. The sales staff were already organizing paperwork, reviewing client lists, and preparing vehicles for potential buyers. Outside, the parking lot remained calm as the city slowly woke up around them. Then something unusual happened. At first, it was only a distant sound. The low, synchronized hum of multiple luxury engines approaching the building. Several employees near the glass windows looked outside with curiosity. A long line of black vehicles slowly entered the dealership parking lot, one after another. Sleek black sedans, professional security vehicles, and finally, a car that immediately captured everyone's attention, a Rolls Royce Phantom, gleaming under the morning sunlight as it rolled smoothly toward the front entrance. Inside the showroom, conversations began to slow. Luxury clients sometimes arrived in impressive cars, but this was different. This arrival felt organized, deliberate, important. Victor noticed the activity near the windows and walked over, his curiosity growing as he observed the convoys stopping outside. Several men in dark suits stepped out of the first vehicles. Their posture, their movements, and the quiet coordination between them made one thing clear. They were secure. The silence inside the showroom felt heavier than any confrontation could have been. Elena slowly walked toward the exact car she had admired the previous afternoon. The same vehicle that had triggered the moment leading to her humiliation. Now no ropes blocked her path. No one dared to stop her. The sales staff who had once quietly laughed now stood completely still. Their earlier confidence had disappeared. Daniel observed the vehicles calmly, his presence filling the room with quiet authority. Victor Langford stood nearby, suddenly aware that his reputation, his business, and his decisions were now under the attention of someone far more powerful than he had ever expected to encounter. Elena gently ran her hand across the polished surface of the luxury car once again. But this time the atmosphere was different. There were no whispers, no judgment, only silence. After a moment, she stepped back and looked around the showroom, not with anger, but with clarity, because the lesson unfolding in that room had nothing to do with wealth. It had everything to do with respect. People are often judged by appearances, by clothing, by status, by assumptions made in seconds. But the truth about someone's value can never be measured by what they wear or how they look. And that morning, every person inside that dealership understood that reality more clearly than ever before. Victor Langford quietly lowered his gaze. The mistake he had made the previous day could never be undone, but the message left behind would remain far longer than the embarrassment of that moment. Because respect is not something that should only be given to those who appear powerful. It is something every human being deserves. Elena and Daniel eventually walked toward the exit together. Not in anger, not in revenge, but with the calm understanding that their presence had already delivered the lesson that needed to be learned.